Charles Dickens. What was the social and political atmosphere in the early 19th century? A la Shmoop.
In many ways, the 19th century is so important in British history because it's a period of transition. It's really a period in which Britain is modernizing. And so, emerging from earlier centuries, you have very deeply and legally entrenched class distinctions. So you have the royalty and the aristocracy, you have the clergy, you have the working classes, you have the poor. And in many ways, again, these were enshrined in law in the sense that different sets of laws would apply to different classes. There were certain things that you could and could not do as a member of each of these classes. And it goes without saying, I think, that the monarchy, for example, and the aristocrats had the most power and the most money and the most freedom. So one of the things that happens that really starts to reach a fever pitch, I guess, in the 19th century is the rise of the middle class. Which, for all intents and purposes, had not existed before. And by middle class in this country, in America, we think of middle class more as a kind of income bracket. But in this way, I mean middle class more working class, that you have to have a job to earn money and to own things. The aristocracy get that stuff by birth and by warfare, but the working class has to earn it. And so Dickens is very much part of this emerging middle class. And one of the things that the growing middle class, both growing in terms of population and in terms of power, bring about the many reform bills. So one thing that happens is widespread education reforms. More children are going to school than ever before, and more children are going to school for free than ever before. So Britain is trying to invent public education, essentially, and they do. Again, we talked earlier about literacy rates. So before, working class and lower class people would not have had much access to that kind of education. Literacy skyrockets during the 19th century and reaches present day levels, and probably around the turn of that century into the 20th. So that's a huge change. And also, it's that kind of legalistic, infrastructural, economic change that enables Dickens to be a success, because the more people who can read, the more people will buy your books. So that's a big deal that had a direct impact on him as well. And then I mentioned things like divorce, voting rights, who can run for office, those kinds of things. All of that is changing, and that power is being given more and more and more to the middle class. And eventually, another thing that would happen is, we call it the Victorian period because of Queen Victoria, who dies in 1901. And I would say that she is maybe one of the last monarchs to really hold real power. Queen Elizabeth, God love her, does not have a whole lot of real political power. Most of this is in the hands of the Prime Minister and in the British Parliament. But that's also the transition that happens, is power gets devolved from the monarchy into the hands of elected representatives and into the hands of the Parliament. So Britain emerges as much more of a democracy than when it went into the 19th century.
What was the class structure in England in the early 1800s? What caused a power redistribution among the classes? Why did literacy rates rise in the 19th century? Reading is half the battle. G.I. Joe, or something like that.